You may get the Cartoon Network all the time, but if you or your friends don't, call your cable operator and ask for it by name. The Cartoon Network.
This is Porky Pig. This is Mr. Pig. Porky has hooves. Mr. Pig has hooves. Porky has a blunt snout. Mr. Pig has a blunt snout. Porky likes the water. Mr. Pig likes the water. Porky can sustain large blows to the head. Mr. Pig can't. Nothing compares to Cartoon Network, the only place for all of your favorite bigger-than-life cartoons 24 hours a day.
That's all, folks.
Yes, I do think you're handsome. Really.
Here's one more reason you should have the Cartoon Network. To be continued on the Cartoon Network. Ask your cable operator to add the Cartoon Network to your basic cable lineup. The Cartoon Network, the best cartoons ever made, 24 hours a day.
Wow! A whole channel of nothing but cartoons. Wow!
Cartoons Fridays.
Is that it?
No, that is not it.
Watch the hair.
Hey kids, the long week is over. The heat of the day has turned into the cool of the night. It's Summer Fridays. It's time for some fun. It's time for some giggles. It's time for some cartoons. Let's start the night off with Codename Kids Next Door and follow it up with a brand new Dexter's Laboratory. After that, it's the Cartoon Network premiere of the Powerpuff Girls movie, right here on Summer Fridays, only on Cartoon Network. It's the end of the week. Time for Cartoon Network's Fridays. We're so glad it's Friday, we want to celebrate. And what's better than celebrating with something all new from one of our best cartoons? Let's get the night started with a brand new episode of The Powerpuff Girls. And follow it up with Duck Dodgers, right here on Fridays, only on Cartoon Network.
It's 16 on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Adventure Time on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's a pup named Scooby-Doo on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Batman, the Brave and the Bold on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Baby Looney Tunes on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Bakugan Battle Brawlers on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next is Ben 10.
Coming up next, it's Ben 10 on Cartoon Network.
Ben 10 Alien Force is coming up next.
Coming up next, it's Ben 10 Alien Force on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Ben 10 Ultimate Alien on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Camp Lazlo on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Chaotic on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's an all-new Chaotic on Cartoon Network.
Jopsaki Chooks is coming up next. Chowder is coming up next.
Coming up next, it's Chowder on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Codename Kids Next Door, only on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Codename Kids Next Door on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Courage the Cowardly Dog on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Courage the Cowardly Dog on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Ed, Edd and Eddy on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Foster's Movie, Destination Imagination on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Foster's Movie, House of Blues on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Garfield on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Generator Rex on Cartoon Network.
George of the Jungle is coming up next.
Coming up next, it's George of the Jungle on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Goosebumps on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Hot Wheels Battle Force 5 on Cartoon Network.
Johnny Test is coming up next.
Coming up next, it's Johnny Test on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Crypto the Superdog on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's the League of Super Evil on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Mucha Lucha on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's My Gym Partner's a Monkey on Cartoon Network.
Naruto is coming up next.
Coming up next, it's Pokemon on Cartoon Network.
Pokemon Diamond and Pearl Battle Dimension is coming up next.
Coming up next, it's Pokemon Diamond and Pearl Battle Dimension on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Pokemon Movie 10, The Rise of Darkrai on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Regular Show on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Robot Boy on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Robot Boy on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Scooby-Doo's Arabian Nights on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Scooby-Doo and the Monster of Mexico on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next is Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Scooby-Doo Pirates Ahoy on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Scooby-Doo Where Are You on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Scooby-Doo Where Are You on Cartoon Network.
Skunk Fu is coming up next.
Coming up next, it's Star Wars The Clone Wars on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Stoked on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Teen Titans on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy on Cartoon Network.
The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack is coming up next.
Coming up next, it's The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's The Mr. Men Show on Cartoon Network.
Up next, the Powerpuff Girls continues on Cartoon Network.
Up next, it's The Superhero Squad Show on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's The Secret Saturdays on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's a new episode of The Secret Saturdays on Cartoon Network.
Tom and Jerry are coming up next.
Coming up next, it's Tom and Jerry on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Tom and Jerry Blast Off to Mars on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Tom and Jerry The Fast and the Furry on Cartoon Network.
Total Drama Island is coming up next.
Coming up next, it's Total Drama Island on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Total Drama Action on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's an all-new Totally Spies on Cartoon Network.
What's New Scooby-Doo is coming up next.
Coming up next, it's What's New Scooby-Doo on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's an all-new Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Adventures in Babysitting on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Batman, Mystery of the Batwoman on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Casper's Scare School on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, Garfield Fun Fest on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Home Alone 3 on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Open Season on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Scary Godmother 2, The Revenge of Jenny on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Scooby-Doo, The Mystery Begins on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Teen Titans, Trouble in Tokyo on Cartoon Network.
Good morning. All your favorites are right here. Wow. Now let's have an awesome day. Here on Cartoon Network. Next, it's the amazing world of Gumball. Next, it's Victor and Valentino. Next, it's Craig of the Creek. Next, it's Teen Titans Go. Coming up next, it's a new Apple and Onion. Coming up next, it's Apple and Onion. Apple and Onion continues next, followed by a new Teen Titans Go. Coming up next, it's more Teen Titans Go, followed by the new show Thundercats Roar. The new show Thundercats Roar continues next. The new show Thundercats Roar continues now. Coming up next, it's a new DC Superhero Girls. Coming up next, it's more new DC Superhero Girls. Coming up next, it's a new Unikitty. Coming up next, it's more new Unikitty. Coming up next, it's more Steven Universe Future. Coming up next, it's the Steven Universe Future 4-episode finale. Coming up next, it's the Steven Universe Future 4-episode finale. Coming up next, it's more new Craig of the Creek, followed by a new Victor and Valentino. Coming up next, it's a new Victor and Valentino, followed by a new Total Dramarama. Coming up next, it's more new Victor and Valentino, followed by a new Total Dramarama. Coming up next, it's a new Total Dramarama, followed by a new Thundercats Roar. Coming up next, it's more new Total Dramarama, followed by a new Thundercats Roar. Coming up next, it's a new Thundercats Roar. Coming up next, it's more new Thundercats Roar. Coming up next, it's more The Amazing World of Gumball. Coming up next, it's Apple and Onion. Coming up next, it's the Tom and Jerry Show. Coming up next, it's Teen Titans Go. Coming up next, it's The Amazing World of Gumball. Coming up next, it's 4 all-new episodes of Teen Titans Go. Coming up next, it's the amazing world of Gumball. Coming up next, it's Teen Titans Go. Coming up next, it's the Tom and Jerry Show. Coming up next, it's a new Looney Tunes. Coming up next, it's Ben 10. Coming up next, it's Craig of the Creek. Coming up next, it's the premiere of the Lego Batman movie. Coming up next, it's Total Dramarama. Coming up next, it's Victor and Valentino. Coming up next, it's We Bare Bears. Coming up next, it's a new Mau Mau, Heroes of Pure Heart. Coming up next, it's more The Amazing World of Gumball. Coming up next, it's Teen Titans Go. Coming up next, it's more Craig of the Creek. Coming up next, it's more Victor and Valentino. Coming up next, it's more Total Dramarama. Coming up next, it's a new Steven Universe future. Well, that was an awesome day.
Oh, yeah!
Thanks for hanging out and watching cartoons with us.
Yay!
We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Cartoon Network. Good night.